Tom Wolfe, the great writer Tom Wolfe, he published a wonderful, wonderful essay in the American Spectator in 1987. It was called The Great Relearning. And it was about a hippie commune in the 1960s. And this is what he said. He said, the hippies, as they became known, sought nothing less than to sweep aside all codes and restraints of the past and start from zero. Among the codes and restraints that people in the commune swept aside quite purposely were those that said you shouldn't use other people's toothbrushes or sleep on other people's mattresses without changing the sheets, or as was more likely, without using any sheets at all, or that you and 5 other people shouldn't drink from the same bottle of Shasta or take tokes from the same cigarette. And now in 1968, they were relearning the laws of hygiene by getting the mange, the grunge, the itch, the twitch, the thrush, the scroff, the rot, diseases, in other words, that hadn't appeared since the invention of modern medicine. This process, namely the relearning, following a Promethean and unprecedented start from zero, seems to me to be the leitmotif of our current interlude here in the dying years of the 20th century. Well, that's where I think we are right now. The left threw out all the rules and traditions, this thing that they called wokeness, that they now say doesn't exist or is overblown. It wasn't, it's real. And it was basically just telling us that all the rules and traditions of our culture, of Western culture, of Christianity, of all the things of the founding, especially, I would say, all of these things didn't count, and we were going to have a beautiful, beautiful new world without them. And instead, what we've got is the cultural equivalent of the mange, the grunge, the itch, the twitch, the thrush, the scroff, and the rot. Because we forgot, we went back to ground zero because they were going to rebuild everything as a utopia. And instead, we got all the old diseases that we knew were there. And one of these diseases has to do with racism. And this week, a federal court granted former police officer Derek Chauvin, they granted his defense team the right to access and analyze some of George Floyd's autopsy samples to find out whether he really died from anything Chauvin did or whether he had a heart attack. Instead, the Biden administration and the defense, the prosecution, are trying to stop them from getting this. Whether this will get Chauvin out of prison, he's been sentenced up to 22 years in prison by both the state, where he was convicted of unintentionally murdering Floyd, and he's basically sentenced to the same thing by the federal government, where he pleaded out to violating Floyd's civil rights. And the state has already refused his appeal, and SCOTUS has refused to hear the case. So it's unlikely he's going to get out or get a new trial. But my Christmas wish, one of my Christmas wishes, is that the full truth will come out about this case, because even if he made policing mistakes, and I suspect he did make policing mistakes, but police make mistakes. It's a high stress decision-making, split-second decision-making business that you have to do. And so you cannot put people in prison, policemen in prison, for making mistakes. But I think that there is a strong likelihood that his mistakes were not responsible for Floyd's death. And I don't think a cop who makes mistakes should be in prison. I don't like to second guess a jury, because I've covered trials and I know that juries hear things that none of us hear and see things that none of us see, including the faces, the way the defendants behave and stuff like this. But this case was not a fair trial. Derek Chauvin did not get a fair trial. There was the threat, the constant threat of violence in the streets. The judge was clearly cowed, in my opinion, was clearly making decisions to make sure this thing went through as quickly as possible. We had morons like Maxine Waters, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, were threatening the city with riots if he was let off. He's cut 4.
We're looking for a guilty verdict. We're looking for a guilty verdict, and we're looking to see if all of the talk that took place and has been taking place after they saw what happened to George Floyd, if nothing does not happen, then we know that we've got to not only stay in the street, but we've got to fight for justice.
Now, that is a United States Congresswoman calling essentially for riots that are already going on, that have already been going on. And she can only do that because the press, this incredible monocultural press that was so corrupt that we have to destroy, we have destroyed, but we have to replace it. That's the thing. You can't just destroy it, because they will come roaring back. Jim Acosta and Ms. Stelter will come right back if we don't replace them with reporting on, it doesn't even have to be reporting from the right. I don't want reporting from the right. I want good factual reporting. The reason they could do it, because this is the way these riots were covered by our friends at CNN and other places. Cut 12.
I argue to you tonight, all punches are not equal morally.
It says it right in the name, Antifa, anti-fascism, which is what they were there fighting. Listen, there's, no organization is perfect. There was some violence.
Any reasonable person would say we shouldn't be destroying other people's property, but these are not reasonable times.
But thank goodness for the looters, man.
And please, show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
I don't care that much about statues.
Shouldn't that be done by a commission or the city council, not a mob in the middle of the night throwing it into the harbor?
People will do what they do.
You're seeing behind me is one of multiple locations that have been burning in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Do not get it twisted and think that, this is something that has never happened before, and then this is so terrible, and where are we, and these savages and all of that. This is how this country was started.
Study after study has shown that the police are not more likely to use deadly force against a black person than a white person. Black people commit more crimes, percentage-wise, than white people. And as much as they try to debunk the statistic that black people make up 13 or 14% of the country, but commit 50% of the murders and violent crimes, they can't debunk it. That stat is actually a real stat. And that, look, you can give any reason you want. I don't care what your reasons is. Those are the facts. The police don't care about the reasons. They're not there to fix the reasons. That's the job of policymakers. They do this again and again. The policymakers screw up, and then they point at the guy who's the victim, which is the cop, who just has to keep the streets safe. If he had an app on his iPhone that showed criminal intent, he would not be looking at the face of the criminal. He would be looking at his app to see whether there was criminal intent there, and he would not care about the race. But as it is, this is one of the things he has to look at, because these are the facts on the ground. Another place where this came true was in the case in 2006, where members of the Duke lacrosse team were accused of crystal Magnum, who had obviously a highly sexualized past and all this stuff, and the team was held up to ridicule and hatred by the same horrifying media that Jim Acosta and Miss Stelter are pretending belongs on a pedestal. The kids were suspended. The accused were suspended. Their season was ended. The Duke became completely hypersensitive about this and passed policies on this. And it was also, these kids were treated so badly by the district attorney, Mike Nifong, that he was ultimately disbarred. He was imprisoned for a brief period. And now Crystal Magnum admits that she was lying. This cut 6.
God has given me the grace and the courage to stand up. No one deserves to be sexually assaulted, regardless of their profession or regardless of what they have done.
Now, I called her Magnum. It's Mangum. And she's now in prison for stabbing her boyfriend to death. And that's so she's had a come to Jesus, and she's now confessing that this was. Now, Evan Thomas of Newsweek said famously, "We got the facts wrong, but the narrative right." And this is what we've forgotten. When I was quoting Tom Wolfe that we have forgotten the basic rules, this is what we've forgotten. You find the facts, and the facts create the narrative. The narrative emerges. It is not the other thing around. And this is another thing we've forgotten. Racism is wrong. Racism is wrong. We know this from our Bible. Men and women are made in God's image. We know that there are no Greek or Jews in Christ. We know that racism is wrong, and it's wrong, and no matter who you do it against. And this is so important. To me, it's bad people who judge people by their race. We keep saying, well, the racists did this, so we have to do this to the white people, or whatever it is that they think. It's bad people like the Ku Klux Klan and like the New York Times' Nicole Hannah-Jones, who judge people and hate people according to their race. Look, there are good things to do and there are bad things to do, and that's how we judge people in the world. We judge people. You get to choose whether you do bad things or good things. It doesn't matter whether you were mistreated as a child. It doesn't matter whether you were mistreated by society. You do the good things and you don't do the bad things. And if you want to work to change society, go ahead. But you cannot dole out justice like Alvin Bragg according to the skin color of people. That is an evil. We have forgotten this. And George Floyd has been made the poster child of racism. He's been made the poster child of acceptable racism. And that's not his fault. He's dead, but that's what he's been used for. Joe Biden did it. The press did it. The left has done it. And we need to expose, if he was not killed by that cop's actions, we need to expose that. I want the truth to come out, whether it gets Derek Chauvin out of prison, as I believe he should be. The guy was stabbed like 20 times while he was in prison. I don't have any comment on him personally, but as a news figure, I think he is a martyr to a lie, and I want to see the lie exposed, and that is my racial Christmas wish. If you love that, and I know you did, like and subscribe, and also subscribe to The Andrew Klavan Show wherever you get your podcasts.